Thank you, Garda, and I want to commend my colleague Deputy O'Callaghan for bringing forward this much-needed legislation. It is a source of great frustration to the public at large and to the victims of crime. The sheer astonishment at how many of the perpetrators transpire to be already on bail for other offences, have a string of previous convictions, are awaiting charge, are awaiting sentencing, and generally to the knowledge of the Gardaí and to the knowledge of the courts on many other offences, yet remain at large to continue to burgle, to steal, to pilfer, to terrorise many homes, despite all the above being the case. Not only is it a source of great frustration and alarm to the general public, but it is equally a frustration shared by those who are charged with the security of the state and with those who are charged with maintaining public order and defending the public from such crimes, namely the Gardaí Síochána. And I note that Assistant Commissioner John O'Driscoll recently outlined the difficulties when the Gardaí were implementing Operation Thor, which I commend them on. It had some great successes, but I noticed that some of the individuals being targeted had again a string of offences to their name. Many were on bail, many were repeat offenders, quite prolific in fact, and he observed in a press conference that the sentences being imposed for such crimes, particularly burglaries, were inadequate deterrents to repeat offending, and in fact were being shrugged off in many cases, and indeed many burglaries were being committed and recommitted before they were ever sentenced for the original crime. This highlights the serious concern that this is causing in the upper echelons of the Gardaí, as well as in the general public. The bill, at a technical level, seeks to replace the may with shall in terms of the sentencing guidelines. I think it's Section 2A of the Bail Act. Judicial discretion does not always work. We know that sometimes, if a court may do something, it often does not do it. When you look no further than Section 15A of the Misuse of Drugs Act for a similar comparison, Section 15A of the Misuse of Drugs Act was an attempt to introduce mandatory minimum sentencing for serious offences, generally regarding drugs and drug with intent to supply. And indeed, there was a provision introduced of 10 years minimum sentencing for repeat offenders in that regard. It did include a get out of jail, literally get out of jail clause, which said that in exceptional circumstances they could avoid the minimum sentencing. Unfortunately, it's been experienced of the courts that almost every offender has been construed to have exceptional circumstances. Those exceptional circumstances have now become the norm, and I would cite that as an example of where, unfortunately, the legislation with good intent has been circumvented and there's been inconsistencies in the judicial approach taken. Having said that, having said that about the judicial inconsistencies there, I do want to commend the recent decision of the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeal considered a number of burglaries and the difficulties and consistency of sentencing, and actually tried to impose a kind of reference sentence in a recent judgment which was reported in the Irish Times and elsewhere, and Tom O'Malley, the legal academic, talked on it at length, effectively commending them for saying somebody needs to take the bull by the horns and actually apply some kind of reference sentencing and encourage the courts to be tougher in these kind of situations, and actually to have a criteria and a yardstick at hand that they can use to apply sentencing. On the more general sense, I think there has been a total breakdown in law and order in many rural areas in particular, and we are still reeling as a state and as a society from the wide-scale closure of Garda stations in 2012-2013. I know in my own area, my own constituency of Kildare North, we saw 5 stations closed along the West Wicklow North Kildare border: Ballymore, Eustace, Kill, Garda stations, Hollywood and Lavin, and 5 stations were closed along that swathe of territory, leaving them completely exposed to criminality, and indeed they were and are being targeted. Those stations covered a very large area. Not only was there a presence, but there was a local Gardaí in each station that actually knew the area, had local intelligence, knew the people, knew the activity, knew the rhythms of the area, and could keep an eye when things went awry. I was at a meeting in Broadford, North West Kildare, on the other end of the constituency just last week, and again we heard tales of machinery being pilfered, agricultural equipment, farm machinery being taken at will, and again, very often the local Gardaí and the local community are well aware of the perpetrators, many of whom it turned one individual was out on over 100 previous offences, and yet that continues to occur. It's also worth noting that that particular area is served from Leaks at Garda Station, which is an hour's drive away, despite the fact that Gardaí in Enfield and Eden Derry are only moments away, but cannot respond because of the jurisdictional splits. This is a situation that I hope the Minister and Gardaí management can investigate. I'll hand over to my colleague.